One introduction. Rosep view: the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rosep view: purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to residents against wood smoke emission particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates, or ROSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this ROSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning, and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Episode 57 DHWP June 16, 2025 Via doctors can refuse to treat Democrats and unmarried veterans. In episode 57 DHWP 1 Republican MAGA Trump voter assassinates Democratic Minnesota Senate Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband in their home in what Minnesota Governor Tim Walz terms a political assassination. 2 headlines. 3 Artificial intelligence AI is poised to rewrite history literally. 4 To protest budget cuts, young scientists try letters to the editor. 5 It is not just you, the tech situation is getting worse. 6 The Bureaucrat and the Billionaire inside the DOGE chaotic takeover of Social Security. 7 California opens investigation into State Farm. The insurance regulator of California says the volume of complaints against the company following the 2025 catastrophic wildfires in Los Angeles prompted the inquiry. 8 Many older people embrace vaccines. Research is proving them right. Newer formulations are even more effective at preventing illnesses that commonly afflict seniors, perhaps even dementia. 9 Extremely disturbing and unethical new rules allow VA doctors to refuse to treat Democrats' unmarried veterans. Department of Veterans Affairs says the changes come in response to a Trump executive order defending women. 10 New York congestion pricing has transformed New York City streets, but can it survive Trump? Main content. 1 Republican MAGA Trump voter assassinates Democratic Minnesota Senate Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband in their home in what Minnesota Governor Tim Walz terms a political assassination. Edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. Substack letters from an American. Heather Cox Richardson. June 15, 2025 Yesterday began with the horrific news that a gunman had shot 2 Minnesota lawmakers and their spouses in what Minnesota Governor Tim Walz said appeared to be a politically motivated assassination. State Representative Melissa Hortman, who was the top Democrat in the Minnesota House, and her husband Mark both died in the attack at their home in Brooklyn Park, a city near Minneapolis. The gunman also shot Democratic Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman 9 times and his wife Yvette Tate at their home in Champlin. The hospital reports they are in stable condition after surgery. Law enforcement officers encountered the suspected gunman, 57-year-old Vance Bolter, coming out of the Hortman house. He was dressed as a police officer. Officers exchanged gunfire with him before he fled, leaving behind his vehicle, which looked much like a police car, and it was a list of dozens of people he wanted to kill. They were mostly Democrats or people connected to abortion rights efforts. Law enforcement officers captured Bolter tonight. MAGA Republicans are working hard to identify Bolter with what Senator Mike Lear called Marxism and Senator Bernie Moreno called the extreme left, but public databases show Bolter was in the past a registered Republican. His evangelical religion and his anti-LGBTQ and anti-abortion stances reflect MAGA positions. A roommate of Bolter told reporters that Bolter was a strong supporter of Trump. Senator Chris Murphy DCT noted that MAGA has been bathed in political violence for the last 5 years. The Trump pardoning of the January 6 rioters, including those convicted of extreme violence, became a clear endorsement of violence committed in his name. Trump has encouraged violence and cozied up to brutal dictators, while MAGA has fetishized guns when he celebrates violence. Unhinged people listen. Murphy points out that while people of all political persuasions commit violence, no Democratic leader encourages violence as a political norm the way Trump and MAGA have done, citing a straight line from January 6 to the pardons to the assault on Senator Padilla to Minnesota. The entire Minnesota delegation to the U.S. Congress issued a joint statement on politically motivated shootings. Democrats and Republicans together wrote, "Today we speak with one voice to express our outrage, grief and condemnation of this horrible attack on public servants. There is no place in our democracy for politically motivated violence. We are praying for the recovery of John and Yvette, and we grieve the loss of Melissa and Mark with their family, colleagues and Minnesotans across the state. We are grateful for the swift response of law enforcement to the situation and continued efforts after that start to the day the country turned to the No Kings protests in a dramatic rejection of the Trump consolidation of power. At least 5 million Americans turned out for peaceful protests across the country. Cities turned out huge numbers of protesters at more than 2,000 planned events, and small towns, including those in Republican-dominated states, also boasted rallies. The mood was festive as people held signs with anti-Trump and pro-American images and slogans and sang the witty Guthrie famous American anthem, "This land is your land." American flags were everywhere. The rejection Trump faced yesterday was a big tub of rock salt poured on his wounds of lifelong insecurity. That profound injury to the Trump sense of self braced observers for lashing out of epic proportions as he tries to demonstrate that he is in fact powerful. We got that anger and fear in a social media post at 8:43 p.m. tonight. In a post almost certainly not written by Trump, his account then declared war on Democrats the day after a gunman shot two Democratic lawmakers and their spouses in their homes. The Trump account posted that only 27% of registered voters support the budget reconciliation bill of Republicans while 53% oppose it. As for Trump himself, a Quinnipiac poll from June 11 showed that 38% of registered voters approve of the way he is handling the job of the presidency while 54% disapprove. Only 30% of registered voters approve strongly of the way he is handling the job while 49% strongly disapprove. While Trump and his loyalists are trying to project an image of invincibility, their actual power seems to be faltering. 10 years ago tomorrow, on June 16, 2015, Trump rode down the escalator at Trump Tower to a lobby filled with extras to announce he was running for president. One reporter called his speech in 2015 eccentric. 2A headlines: The New York Times, June 16, 2025. 3 Human interest. AI is poised to rewrite history. Literally. The New York Times. 4 Medicine and science and Trump budget cuts. Graduate students push back against science funding cuts. The New York Times media. Terry Moran says he does not regret posts criticizing Trump administration. The New York Times. Medicine and science. How heat affects the brain. The New York Times. Medicine and science opinion. We may soon be telling a very different kind of story about dementia. The New York Times. 5 Medicine and science. The tick situation is getting worse. The New York Times. Trump actions. The Trump strategy in law firm cases lose, do not appeal yet prevail. The New York Times. Medicine and science. Will Trump end the OSHA federal heat protections for workers? The New York Times. Trump budget cuts. Business lobbyists scramble to kill $100 billion called a revenge tax. The New York Times. 6 Trump budget cuts inside the DOGE chaotic takeover of Social Security. The New York Times. Trump in Europe. In the world. Trump live updates as G7 meets in Canada. Trump laments the ejection of Russia. The New York Times. Trump tariffs. Toy makers team up with artists for tariff-proof toys. The New York Times. Utilities opinion. Infrastructure in America will soon be obsolete. The New York Times. Utilities. The Trump trade and tax policies start to stall U.S. battery boom. The New York Times. Ukraine takes first step toward carrying out minerals deal with U.S. The New York Times. 2B headlines. The New York Times, June 14, 2025. 7 Air pollution from wood-burning wildfire smoke. California opens investigation into State Farm. The New York Times. Human interest. Instagram wants Gen Z. What does Gen Z want from Instagram? The New York Times. 8 Medicine and science. Many older people embrace vaccines. Research is proving them right. The New York Times. Trump actions. Trump Incorporated filings show staff profited from being in the Trump orbit. The New York Times. Trump actions. How Amy Coney Barrett is confounding the right and the left. The New York Times. Trump actions. Justice Barrett in her own words. The New York Times. Trump budget cuts. How retirees can manage RMDs in a volatile market. The New York Times. Trump budget cuts opinion. Millions of Americans like Trump better in theory than in practice. The New York Times. Trump and Europe. Anti-tourism protests in Italy, Portugal and Spain draw attention to quality of life issues. The New York Times. Trump and Europe. Traveling to Europe here is what to expect from tourism protests on June 15. The New York Times. Trump tariffs. Local malls are sitting empty and becoming a headache for small towns. The New York Times. 2C other media. Wisconsin Democrats pick Devin Remiker as successor to party leader Ben Wickler. 2D headings. The Guardian, June 16, 2025. 9 Medicine and science. Extremely disturbing and unethical new rules allow VA doctors to refuse to treat Democrats. Unmarried veterans. Trump administration. The Guardian. Minnesota suspect and Minnesota lawmaker killing visited other homes of legislators. Prosecutors say lift in New York and air pollution. Congestion pricing has transformed New York City streets, but can it survive Trump? New York. The Guardian. Trump actions. This is the looting of America. Trump and company and the extraordinary conflicts of interest in his second term. Trump administration. The Guardian. Trump and Europe and the world. European leaders at G7 trying to bring Iran back to negotiating table. G7. The Guardian. 3 Artificial intelligence. AI is poised to rewrite history. Literally, the ability to read and summarize text by AI is already making it a useful tool for scholarship. How will it change the stories we tell about the past? Subsedited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 16, 2025. During my 25 years as a magazine editor, my favorite part of the job has always been helping writers figure out what the story is, where to start it, where to end it, what is important and new about it. To figure it out, a historian had loaded some of his sources into Notebook LM, an app for researchers and writers that he himself helped build after becoming the editorial director of the Google Labs division 3 years ago. Unlike most other AI tools which draw their answers to questions from the mind-boggling infinitude of data they were trained on, Notebook LM draws only from files selected by the user, on the premise that most forms of research benefit from thoughtfully curating your source material. Since the worldwide release last year, Google and Johnson have been promoting its utility for all manner of tasks, whether it is auto-generating minutes and takeaways from an audio recording of a meeting or encouraging a more illicit use of AI among college students. The Notebook LM most viral capability is an auto-generated podcast which in a matter of a couple of minutes will spit out a detailed conversation between two freakishly realistic voices, drawing out the key concepts of the source material. But as an occasional author of history books myself, I was most interested in how AI, one of whose many superpowers is the ability to inhale large amounts of text in an instant and offer credible summaries of it, might transform the way history is written. Would if ebooks of history came enhanced with a Notebook LM-like interface? Imagine, he went on, that there is a linear version of the story with chapters, but then the primary materials the author used to write the book also come bundled with it. That way, instead of just a bibliography, you have a live collection of all the original sources for a chatbot to explore, delivering timelines, mind maps, explanations of key themes, anything you can think to ask. It is perhaps the most brain-breaking vision of AI history, in which an intelligent agent helps you write a book about the past and then stays attached to that book into the indefinite future, forever helping your audience to interpret it from the perspective of human knowledge. Is that utopia or dystopia? Who is to say? For to protest budget cuts, young scientists try letters to the editor. Hundreds of graduate students are writing to their hometown newspapers to defend their research as the Trump administration drastically reduces science funding. Subsedited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 16, 2025. As a scientist, the focus of one researcher is cerebral. Literally, she studies the brain, investigating the interplay of memory and stress. But when she was a graduate student at the University of California, Los Angeles, she sat down to compose a letter in defense of science, and she decided to write from the heart. Her heart is attached to a pacemaker implanted a few years ago to manage an atrioventricular block that made her pulse stutter. Science saved my life, the researcher wrote in a letter to the editor that was published this month in the Marietta Daily Journal, a Georgia newspaper. My happy ending would not have been possible without decades of U.S. research, she added. The woman researcher, age 24, from Powder Springs, Georgia, is one of hundreds of people who wrote to their hometown newspapers as part of a national campaign spearheaded this spring by graduate students and scientists who are just starting their careers. They wanted to draw attention to the research funding cuts by Trump that are scuttling grants, shrinking science labs, and stopping postdoctoral studies. Trump officials have pointed to the importance of cost saving and attributed many of the budget cuts to changing scientific priorities. The White House has moved to cancel research in specific areas like climate science and described some research efforts as wasteful spending. The researcher wrote that the federal funding cuts could threaten the nearby James J. Howard Marine Sciences Laboratory. In interviews, they and other graduate students noted the difficulties of writing around an uncertain future. How do you defend research projects whose benefits can take so many years to materialize? It took centuries for scientists to understand the role of electricity in the human heart. Bit by bit, their discoveries paved the way for pacemakers like the one that saved the woman researcher from Georgia. She had been considering a career in the federal government, perhaps in the National Institutes of Health. Now she is not so sure. I just feel like that is being gutted and decimated right now, she said. 5. It is not just you. The tick situation is getting worse as temperatures rise. Ticks of all kinds are flourishing in ways that threaten the health of people. Subsedited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 16, 2025. There are unwelcome visitors at an office in the Hudson Valley of New York. The unwelcome guests are ticks crawling up the building and trying to get through doors. This is kind of alarming, said a disease ecologist biologist at the Cary Institute of Ecosystem Studies who studies the arachnids and the pathogens they carry. As winters get warmer, ticks of several kinds are flourishing. Deer ticks known for transmitting Lyme disease are moving farther north. The longhorn tick, which came from overseas, has gained a foothold on the East Coast and begun moving west. Gulf Coast ticks have made it to states like Connecticut and Indiana. The Lone Star tick, which can make people allergic to red meat, is fanning out from the south and has been found as far as Canada. Why is this happening and how can you protect yourself? We asked the experts what changes are researchers seeing. A single tick may become more likely to carry multiple pathogens, meaning someone could get Lyme disease and receive treatment without their doctor realizing they also need treatment for babesiosis. A researcher had been working with Defense Department funding to develop one test for numerous tick-borne illnesses, but the Trump administration halted her grant. How can you protect yourself? Try to prevent bites and keep in mind that ticks do not only live in the woods. Wild deer ticks tend to favor wooded areas. They and other species also frequent parks and lawns, and some even approach buildings. Health authorities recommend wearing long pants and long sleeves when you might be exposed, and tucking your shirt into your pants and your pants into socks or boots. Repellents containing DEET are effective on skin and permethrin on clothing. Once you get indoors, check yourself carefully and check children and pets as well, said a scientist at the Canadian National Collaborating Centre for Environmental Health. Ticks may bite anywhere, but they are often drawn to warm, damp areas such as the backs of knees and the groin, underarms, ears and scalp. If you find a tick, remove. The companies sell many removal devices, but tweezers work fine. Grasp the tick where it meets the skin and pull steadily without jerking or twisting. Then disinfect the area and wash your hands. Most tick-borne diseases, including Lyme, offer a grace period. You can prevent transmission if you remove the tick within a certain number of hours, but this may not be true for all diseases, so if you have any unusual symptoms, see a doctor. 6. The Bureaucrat and the Billionaire. Inside the DOGE chaotic takeover of Social Security. Excerpts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 16, 2025. Leland Dudek plucked from a mid-level job only 6 weeks earlier to run Social Security because of his willingness to cooperate with the Musk Department of Government Efficiency. Got an angry call from the White House. According to several people familiar with the exchange, the number is 40%, insisted Katie Miller, a top administration aide who was working closely with Musk. According to one of the people familiar with the April 1st call, Trump believed Musk. She said, do not contradict Trump. Throughout the early months of this Trump presidency, Musk and his allies systematically built a false narrative of widespread fraud at the Social Security Administration based on misinterpreted data, using their claims to justify an aggressive effort to gain access to personal information on millions of Americans. The work has led to the departures of thousands of employees, thinning an already overstretched workforce and setting off a wave of public anxiety over the state of an agency administering politically sacrosanct retirement benefits that Trump has vowed to protect. Musk has left Washington amid a blow-up with Trump, and some of his top aides at DOGE have also departed, leaving federal workers and the public to assess what the Musk tornado-like path through Washington yielded at Social Security. The Musk efforts amount to a case study in what happened when his team of government novices ran a critical government agency through misinformation and social media blasts. Musk became fixated on the program in early February after members of his team misread government spending data, pivotal and previously unreported moment that DOGE believed had exposed massive fraud inside the agency. In response, the Musk team mobilized dozens of Social Security employees to affirm their views about fraud and began a project to ensure dead people were properly classified so they were not mistakenly paid. Even though DOGE officials acknowledged in an internal memo that payments were not being made in those cases, the number of people visiting field offices to change their banking information still rose sharply compared with the previous year. According to internal agency statistics, the higher traffic was poorly timed. At least 36 field offices were estimated to be losing more than a quarter of their staff. Agency data shows during one of his last weeks in charge, Dudek drove around the Midwest by himself, visiting offices that had been hit especially hard by cuts. At a Milwaukee field office, Dudek stopped a woman driving out of the parking lot, a moment witnessed by a reporter. Were we able to take care of your needs today? He asked. Not at all, the woman replied. Dudek apologized as she drove away. 7 California opens investigation into State Farm. The insurance regulator of California says the volume of complaints against the company following the 2025 catastrophic wildfires in Los Angeles prompted the inquiry subheaded by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 12, 2025. The California Insurance Commissioner announced a formal investigation into State Farm on Thursday as complaints continue to mount about the handling of claims by the insurer from the catastrophic wildfires in Los Angeles. The so-called market conduct examination is a tool used when there is evidence of broad consumer complaints. According to a spokesman for the department, it is the fourth time that State Farm General Insurance Company, the largest insurer in California which covers 1 out of every 5 homes in California, has been the subject of such an investigation since 2014, said Michael Cia, Deputy Insurance Commissioner. Some troubling patterns that my staff will investigate include the frequent reassignment of multiple adjusters with little continuity in communication and consistent management of similar claims and inadequate record keeping, Lara said in a statement. These issues create unnecessary stress, prolong recovery, and erode trust. The multiple fires that erupted on January 7 in Eaton Canyon and on a hillside in Pacific Palisades have left a burn zone, and like almost any other, over 16,000 homes, businesses and other structures were obliterated and many others were damaged by toxic smoke. State Farm has already paid nearly $4 billion to its customers in California following the recent wildfires. He said this is the fourth time State Farm will be the subject of a review in just over a decade. The past reviews included regular examinations conducted for all insurance companies operating in the state, as well as targeted investigations such as the one announced on Thursday, said Cia. Past inquiries have resulted in the recovery of hundreds of millions of dollars in claims for survivors, Cia said, and companies have been required to improve claims practices when systemic issues are identified. Cia said they can prompt regulatory or legislative action if State Farm is wrongfully denying my neighbor's coverage. We need to know why. Plain and simple. 8 Many older people embrace vaccines. Research is proving them right. Newer formulations are even more effective at preventing illnesses that commonly afflict seniors, perhaps even dementia. Subheaded by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 14, 2025. An insurance agent in Victoria, Texas had seen friends suffer so badly from shingles that she wanted to receive the first approved shingles vaccine as soon as it became available, even if she had to pay for it out of pocket. Her doctor and several pharmacies turned her down because she was below the recommended age at the time, which was 60. So in 2016 she celebrated her 60th birthday at her local CVS in the United States, where more potent vaccine Shingrix became available in 2017 and supplanted Zostavax. Oxford investigators found an even stronger effect by matching almost 104,000 elder Americans who received a first dose of the new vaccine. Full immunization requires 2 with a group that had received the earlier formulation. They found delayed onset of dementia in the Shingrix group. How a shingles vaccine might reduce dementia remains unexplained. Scientists have suggested that viruses themselves may contribute to dementia, so suppressing them could protect the brain. Perhaps the vaccine revs up the immune system in general or affects inflammation. Shingrix, now recommended for adults over 50, is 90% effective in preventing shingles and the lingering nerve pain that can result in 2021. However, only 41% of older Americans had received 1 dose of either shingles vaccine. A connection to dementia will require further research, and a doctor is trying to raise philanthropic funding for a clinical trial. And if you needed another reason to get this vaccine, here it is: 9 extremely disturbing and unethical new rules allow VA doctors to refuse to treat Democrats' unmarried veterans. Department of Veterans Affairs says the changes come in response to a Trump executive order defending women, subheaded by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, June 16, 2025. Doctors at Department of Veterans Affairs VA hospitals nationwide could refuse to treat unmarried veterans and Democrats under new hospital guidelines imposed following an executive order by Trump. The new rules also apply to psychologists, dentists, and a host of other occupations. They have already gone into effect in at least some VA Medical centers medical staff are still required to treat veterans regardless of race, color, religion and sex, and all veterans remain entitled to treatment, but individual workers are now free to decline to care for patients based on personal characteristics not explicitly prohibited by federal law. Language requiring healthcare professionals to care for veterans regardless of their politics and marital status has been explicitly eliminated. Doctors and other medical staff can also be barred from working at VA hospitals based on their marital status, political party affiliation or union activity. The changes also affect chiropractors, certified nurse practitioners, optometrists, podiatrists, licensed clinical social workers and speech therapists. In making the changes, VA officials cite the Trump 30th of January executive order titled Defending Women from Gender Ideology, Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. Medical experts said the implications of rule changes, uncovered by The Guardian, could be far-reaching. They seem to open the door to discrimination on the basis of anything that is not legally protected, said the VA top healthcare official during the Clinton administration. He said the changes open up the possibility that doctors could refuse to treat veterans based on the reason for seeking care, including allegations of rape and sexual assault, current or past political party affiliation or political activity, and personal behavior such as alcohol or marijuana use. The Department of Veterans Affairs is the largest integrated hospital system in the nation with more than 170 hospitals and more than 1,000 clinics. It employs 26,000 doctors and serves 9 million patients annually. In an emailed response to questions, the VA Press Secretary Peter Kasperowicz did not dispute that the new rules allow doctors to refuse to treat veteran patients based on their beliefs, or that physicians could be dismissed based on their marital status or political affiliation, but said all eligible veterans will always be welcome at VA and will always receive the benefits and services they have earned under the law. He said the rule changes were nothing more than a formality, but confirmed that they were made to comply with the Trump executive order. The changes are part of a larger attack on the independence of medicine and science by the Trump administration, which has included restrictions and cuts at the National Institutes of Health and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, where the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., last week fired every member of a key panel that advises the government on vaccines. A VA edict was recently promulgated forbidding agency researchers from publishing in scientific journals without clearance from the VA political appointees. 10 New York congestion pricing has transformed New York City streets, but can it survive Trump? Excerpts edited by Rosep for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, June 16, 2025. Every week a man drives across Lower Manhattan moving bikes between the two NYC Velo shops he has managed for the last 15 years. What used to be a grinding crawl through some of the worst traffic in the world is noticeably less painful lately. It is like night and day, he said. The transformed commute is the result of the most ambitious policy to hit New York in recent memory. Starting January 5, 2025, drivers entering Lower Manhattan began paying a $9 congestion toll aimed at deterring drivers and raising desperately needed funds for the deteriorating public transit system of New York City. The man does not mind being charged for his newly gained time as a motorist. It is like the price of gas goes up, the cost to be in the city goes up. For decades, New York lawmakers have proposed plans for a congestion zone where drivers would have to pay a fee to enter the busiest parts of Manhattan as a means of funding public transit. The idea was first floated in 1952, but it was not until 2007 that then Mayor Michael Bloomberg took a plan to Albany, where it was rejected by state legislators at every turn. The attempts to introduce congestion pricing have been met with acrimony, both sweeping and strange accusations that congestion pricing is a tax on plumbers and on blue-collar workers that was not democratically decided, a cynical cash grab by a mismanaged Metropolitan Transportation Authority (MTA), or a scheme that will flood outer borough streets with displaced traffic. Critics have warned of economic fallout, calling the toll elitist. Despite these objections, the program finally received federal approval in 2023 under the New York Governor Kathy Hochul. It seemed as though congestion pricing might finally happen. However, just days before the program was set to begin in June 2024, Hochul paused implementation, fearing a political fallout. She quickly reinstated the policy after the November 2024 election, with the toll reduced from $15 to $9. 6 months since the tolls switched on, the early results suggest congestion pricing works, yet the policy, 75 years in the making, almost never happened and is still being threatened threatened by a Trump administration eager to terminate the program and to exert control over the Trump hometown. A boon for public transit. The aim of congestion pricing is twofold: to reduce the number of cars on the road, easing traffic and pollution, and to raise sorely needed funds for the New York City ailing public transit network. Manhattan boasts the densest transit network in the Western Hemisphere, but its subway signals are nearly a century old and its dedicated bus lanes relatively scarce. Millions rely on public transit daily, yet over 25% of trains and buses are delayed and the system remains short of legally mandated elevators at dozens of stations. The congestion toll is expected to raise $500 million annually, funds earmarked for long overdue upgrades. So far, revenue is on target. While it will take time for these investments to reach riders, they are expected to make daily commutes faster and more reliable for residents across the city, and in the long term, easing congestion on the streets of Manhattan could pave the way for new bike lanes, expanded pedestrian zones, and dedicated bus corridors that could transform how New Yorkers get around. The Trump most recent salvo to gut the program has been blocked by a temporary injunction from a court. In the meantime, New York still faces a slew of lawsuits from outside the city, and in New Jersey for now the MTA is successfully fighting them off. Congestion pricing is not just surviving, it is thriving. It has been a success. It is not going to be taken out without a lot of people complaining. There are lives that have been saved and people who did not get injured. There is property that did not get damaged. There are lungs that did not get polluted. All of those things are benefits that we are reaping from this.
Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. Rosette view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning, replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rosette view. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.